Hey, I'm Anna. My life changed a lot 5 years into my marriage with Paul. We were a regular couple. I was a teacher, he worked as a manager at an energy company, and everything was pretty simple. Then Paul's dad passed away, leaving his mom Elaine alone in their family house. That's when Paul hit me with a bombshell. "Anna, we need to talk," he said seriously one night. I paused, looking up from my phone. "What's up? Is everything okay?" He took a deep breath and said, "It's about Mom. She's alone in that old house since Dad passed. I think we should move in with her." My stomach dropped. "Move in with Elaine? You know we barely get along," I protested. Paul leaned against the kitchen counter, firm in his expression. "I know, but she's my mom, and she's struggling. Plus, we're just burning money on this rented apartment." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "But this is our space, our home. Moving in with your mom is a whole different ballgame." Paul pleaded, "Please, Anna. It's not just about the space. It's about family. Mom needs us." I felt cornered. "Does your mom need us, or do you need your mom?" I asked. Paul frowned. "That's not fair, Anna. It's not like I'm asking you to live in a dump. It's a huge house, plenty of room for all of us." Tension rose as I questioned our life there. But eventually, I caved for the sake of peace. Moving day was uncomfortable. Elaine's house was this imposing old structure with echoing rooms and a constant chill. Elaine greeted us with a stiff smile, saying, "Welcome to my home. I expect you to respect my ways." I forced a smile, saying, "Of course, Elaine. We appreciate you letting us stay." Living with Elaine felt like living with a hawk. She had a comment for everything: how to put dishes away, how much to water the plants. One night, after a particularly harsh critique on my cooking, I exploded to Paul in our room. "I can't do a damn thing right for your mother. It's like living with a drill sergeant." Paul rubbed his temples, equally frustrated. "Anna, just give it time. She's old and set in her ways." I threw my hands up in frustration. "Great, so we just tiptoe around her till the end of time." He didn't have an answer, and honestly, neither did I. This house, with its constant surveillance and Elaine's scrutinizing eyes, was suffocating. Life in Elaine's house was turning into a daily grind. Just when I thought I could handle it, Paul dropped another bombshell. It was a lazy Sunday afternoon, and I was trying to find some peace in the garden when he came out. "Anna, we need to talk," Paul said, leaning on the garden gate. I looked up, feeling a knot in my stomach. "What now, Paul?" He took a deep breath. "I think you should quit your job and stay home. We're spending a fortune on a nurse and housekeeper for Mom. It makes more sense." I stood up, anger rising. "Quit my job, Paul. I love teaching. It's not just about the money." He ran his hand through his hair, his tone getting edgy. "I know, but think about it. It'll make things easier around here." I shook my head, disbelief washing over me. "So what? I just become a full-time maid and nurse? That's not the life I want." Paul's voice rose. "It's not about what we want, Anna. It's about what's practical. My mom needs us." I glared at him. "No, your mom needs you. I didn't sign up to be her caretaker." He shot back. "Well, things change, Anna. We need to adapt." The word adapt felt like a slap. I loved my job, my independence. This wasn't adapting. This was sacrificing. "You know what, Paul? Fine, I'll do it, but don't expect me to be happy about it." He sighed, a look of relief crossing his face. "Thank you, Anna. It means a lot." But it didn't feel like a victory. Quitting my job felt like losing a part of myself. The days that followed were even harder. I had become a full-time housekeeper, nurse, and cook. Elaine, as always, had her 2 cents to add about everything. "Those curtains need a wash," she'd say, or "the soup is too salty." It was endless. One day, I snapped. Elaine was criticizing the way I ironed her clothes, and I couldn't take it anymore. "Elaine, can you just stop? I'm doing my best here," I said, feeling frustrated. She looked taken aback. "Well, I'm sorry if I have standards, Anna." I threw the iron down, my voice shaking. "I'm not your servant, Elaine. I'm your son's wife. I'm here trying to help, and all you do is criticize me. There was a moment of tense silence, and then Elaine's expression softened slightly. I know you're trying, Anna. I'm just used to things a certain way. I sighed, feeling the tension drain out of me. I know, Elaine, but I'm not you. I have my way of doing things. From that day on, things were slightly better. Elaine toned down her criticisms, and I tried to accommodate her quirks. It was a fragile truce, but it was better than the constant battles. As time dragged on in Elaine's house, the atmosphere grew tenser, almost suffocating. Paul's behavior became increasingly distant and elusive. He was consistently late from work, and when he was home, it was as if he was invisible, retreating to the spare room like it was his sanctuary. One evening, unable to bear the silence and distance any longer, I cornered him in the kitchen. Paul, what's going on with you? You're hardly here, and when you are, it's like you're not even my husband anymore, I said, leaning against the counter with my arms folded. He'd avoided eye contact, absent-mindedly stirring his coffee. Work's a nightmare right now, Anna. Just piles of stress, he replied. I leaned back, still concerned. I get stressed, Paul, but this feels like you're shutting me out. You're here, but you're not really here. He exhaled heavily, his gaze fixed on his coffee. I don't know what you want me to say, Anna. I'm just really tied up with stuff. I wanted to believe him, to understand, but something inside me screamed that there was more to it than he let on. Then there was Lucy, Paul's sister, who made it her mission to add to the tension. Each visit from her was a trial. She'd look around the house with a sneer and quip, still stuck in this old dump, huh? I usually bit my tongue, but one day her taunts hit a nerve. Not all of us have the luxury to mooch off others. Lucy, I shot back. She cackled, her voice grating on my nerves. Oh, look at you playing the martyr in a haunted house. Pathetic. I clenched my jaw, holding back a barrage of words. Paul, ever the silent bystander, offered no defense. His silence was like another jab, another confirmation of the growing gulf between us. The biggest shift, however, came with Elaine one day. She called for Lucy, her voice frail and desperate. Lucy, I need help with a bath. I can't manage on my own anymore. Lucy's response was cold and cutting. Help yourself, Mom. I'm not your caretaker. Elaine broke down in tears, and despite our rocky history, I couldn't leave her in that state. I assisted Elaine with the bath, and something changed between us that day. Elaine started to warm up to me, treating me less like an intruder and more like a daughter. It was a welcome change, but it also emphasized how far Paul and I had drifted apart. Despite Elaine's newfound warmth, the house felt colder and emptier. The walls seemed to echo with a growing silence between Paul and me, a chasm widening with each passing day. The chill in our home grew colder as Paul's late nights at work became the norm, and our conversations turned into mere whispers of their former selves. During one of these fleeting interactions, Paul dropped a bombshell that added to the growing pile of secrets and lies. Anna, I got an apartment near work, he said nonchalantly, as if discussing the weather. I almost dropped the dish I was cleaning. An apartment? Why on earth would you need that? He leaned against the doorframe, avoiding my gaze. It's just practical, Anna. Saves me the commute, especially with the late nights. Anger and confusion surged within me. And you just decided this without talking to me. What? Are we roommates now? He shrugged, his indifference cutting deep. I thought you'd be happy, less stress about me coming home late. I shook my head in disbelief. Happy, Paul? This feels like you're living a double life. What's next? You'll tell me you have a second family? He sighed, rubbing his forehead. Don't be dramatic, Anna. It's not like that. I wanted to push further, to break through his nonchalant facade, but I knew it was futile. The conversation ended there, as did many of our conversations those days. The true shock came a few days later in a candid conversation with Elaine. We were in the living room, sharing a rare moment of calm when she suddenly said, "You know, Paul didn't buy that apartment with his money." I looked at her puzzled. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, then continued, "He used my savings. He said it was an investment, even put it in my name." My heart sank. He's been using your money, and you're okay with this? Elaine shrugged, a sad look in her eyes. I couldn't say no. He's my son. But I thought you should know. I was speechless. Paul's secret apartment was one thing, but using his mother's savings under the guise of an investment felt like the man I married was slipping away, replaced by this stranger with secrets and lies. A few days later, I confronted Paul about it. Why didn't you tell me the apartment was bought with your mom's money? He was unapologetic, almost defiant, because I knew you'd react like this. It's an investment, Anna, not a big deal. I couldn't believe his audacity. Not a big deal. You're gambling with your mom's savings and keeping it from me. What else are you hiding? He turned away, ending the conversation with a dismissive wave. You wouldn't understand, Anna. It's business. The word business felt like a chasm between us, an excuse for everything going wrong in our marriage. Living in Elaine's old, dreary house was taking its toll on me. The once vibrant walls now echoed a somber tone, and every creaking floorboard seemed to whisper secrets. One day, I couldn't take it anymore. Elaine, have you ever thought about renovating the house? I asked over breakfast. It could use some freshening up. Elaine looked up from her tea, surprised. Renovate? I haven't thought about it in years. It's such a big task. I nodded, feeling a spark of enthusiasm. I know, but it could really brighten up the place. Maybe just start with a new coat of paint or some new wallpaper. Elaine considered it for a moment. Well, I suppose it wouldn't hurt to bring some new life into this old house. But are you sure you're up for it? I smiled, eager for a project. Absolutely. It'll be a good change. And so it began. I threw myself into the renovation, painting walls, choosing wallpapers, and even attempting to restore some of the old furniture. It was hard work, but it felt good, like I was breathing life back into the house and, in a way, into myself. One day, while I was up to my elbows in paint, Paul walked in. He looked around, his expression one of shock and disbelief. What the hell, Anna? What are you doing to my mom's house? I stood up, wiping the sweat from my brow. I'm renovating, Paul, like I told Elaine. It's time this place got a little love and care. Paul's face hardened. You had no right to start changing things without asking me. This is my family home, not some DIY project. My temper rose. Your home? When was the last time you even cared about this place, Paul? I'm doing something good here. He took a step closer, his voice rising. You're overstepping, Anna. You always do this. Take control and push everyone else aside. I stared at him incredulously. Take control, Paul. I'm trying to make this gloomy place livable. Maybe if you spent more time here, you'd see that. Before Paul could retort, Elaine walked in. What's all this noise about? Paul turned to her. Mom, did you know about this? About her changing the house? Elaine looked from me to Paul, then back again. Yes, I did, and I'm glad she's doing it. This house needed a change, and Anna's doing a wonderful job. Paul looked like he'd been slapped. But it's our family home? Elaine cut him off, her tone firm. It's my home, Paul, and I want this. Anna has every right to do what she's doing. Paul stormed out of the room, leaving me and Elaine in an awkward silence. I felt a mix of victory and sadness. The house was transforming, but the gap between Paul and me seemed to only grow wider. The day Elaine suffered her stroke, our world turned upside down. I was there, witnessing her sudden decline, her words slurring, her body weakening. Panic gripped me as I called for help, my voice quivering with fear. In the hospital, the grim reality set in. Elaine needed constant care. I looked to Paul for support, but he was distant, his eyes void of the usual concern. Anna, I can't deal with this. I have enough on my plate, he said, his voice cold. I was stunned. You can't deal with this, Paul. She's your mother. He shrugged, his response cutting like a knife. Yeah, and she's been a burden for years. This is just the cherry on top. I couldn't hide my disgust. She's not a burden, Paul. She's family. She needs us. His laugh was bitter. Us? No, Anna. She needs you. I've got other things to handle. I was left speechless, my respect for him sinking. I took it upon myself to care for Elaine. It was hard watching the once strong woman confined to a bed, dependent for every little thing. As I became Elaine's primary caregiver, Paul's visits grew rarer, and his indifference more apparent. His visits were short, his conversations with Elaine brief and superficial. Then Lucy came. I overheard them in the living room, their words like venom. "We should start thinking about the will, dividing the assets," Lucy said, her voice devoid of any emotion. I burst into the room, fury coursing through my veins. How can you be so heartless, discussing her will right in front of her? She's still here. Lucy smirked, her words sharp. "Oh, look who's talking, the saintly daughter-in-law. This is our family's matter, stay out of it." Paul chimed in, his voice laced with cynicism. "Anna, just drop it. It's practical to plan these things. No use pretending she's going to bounce back." I was aghast at his cruelty. Practical. She's your mother, Paul. How can you be so callous? He shrugged, his reply cold and detached. "Life's callous, Anna. Better get used to it." I turned away, my heart heavy with disgust. In the following weeks, I dedicated myself to Elaine's recovery. And to my surprise, she showed signs of improvement. Her fingers twitched, her speech cleared. She even managed a few steps. It was a miracle to me, but a nuisance to Paul and Lucy. Their true colors were now vividly clear. Their mother's plight was nothing more than an inconvenience, a hurdle in their path of inheritance. The betrayal stung deep, not just as a daughter-in-law, but as a human being. Life had settled into a grim routine. Elaine's health was a constant roller coaster, with small victories overshadowed by the looming fear of the worst. Then it happened. Another stroke, this time more severe. The call from the hospital felt like a punch to the gut. Elaine didn't make it. The funeral was a somber affair. I stood beside the grave, my heart heavy, watching as people paid their respects. That's when Paul arrived, and with him, a woman I didn't recognize and two small kids clinging to her hands. "Who's she?" I whispered to myself, my eyes fixed on the unfamiliar woman. Paul approached, his expression unreadable. "Anna, this is Carol, my wife, and these are our kids." I felt like I had been slapped. "Your wife? When did this happen?" He shrugged, a coldness in his voice. "A while ago." "It's none of your business, Anna." I was speechless, my mind reeling. How could he? And during all this time with Elaine, Lucy was there too, her usual sneer in place. "Finally showing your true colors, Anna? Playing the grieving daughter-in-law. It's a bit late for that." I glared at her, my voice laced with contempt. "I was here for Elaine when you both abandoned her." "Don't you dare judge me," Paul interjected. "Let's just get this over with. We have other matters to discuss." After the funeral ended and the gathering moved to Elaine's house for the will reading, Paul and Lucy were like vultures, eagerly awaiting their share. The lawyer began reading the will, and that's when the bombshell dropped. Everything, the house, the money, all of it was left to me. Paul's face went from smug to shocked. "What the hell? This can't be right." Lucy was fuming. She was our mother. How could she leave everything to this nobody? I stood there stunned, not sure how to feel. Happy. Vindicated. It all felt hollow. Paul turned to me, his voice filled with accusation. "You manipulated her, didn't you? Turned her against us." I shook my head, disbelief and anger mixing in my voice. "I did nothing but care for her, which is more than I can say for you." The lawyer intervened. Elaine was very clear in her will. Lucy was seething. "This is not the end. We'll contest this. There's no way we're letting her get away with this." As they left in a huff, I stood there alone in the house that was now legally mine, the walls that had witnessed so much pain, betrayal, and love. I looked around, feeling the weight of Elaine's last act of kindness and the burden of a broken family. The house felt different now, like it was echoing with Elaine's last wishes. I was sitting there, holding the will, still trying to get my head around everything. Elaine had left it all to me, and Paul and Lucy were raging mad about it. They came back the next day, all fired up. You really think you can just take everything? Paul burst out as soon as he stepped in. I looked up, tired but standing my ground. Elaine decided this, Paul. It was her choice. Lucy was red in the face, yelling, "You tricked the sick old lady. We won't let you get away with this." I stood up, fed up with their nonsense. Tricked. I was there for her, unlike you two. She chose to leave it to me. Paul was fuming. So you think you've beaten us? You think you can just snatch everything away? I let out a heavy sigh. I didn't snatch anything, Paul. Elaine gave it to me because she knew I actually cared. Their yelling didn't stop, but it was just noise against the truth I knew. I was there for Elaine when they weren't. The lawyer showed up with a video Elaine had made. Her voice filled the room, and she said it clear as day. I left everything to Anna because she was like the daughter I never had. She was there when my own kids weren't. She deserves it all. The room went quiet. Paul looked like he had been punched in the gut, and Lucy started crying, finally realizing what they had done. After that, Paul and Lucy left, and all their threats just fell flat. I was alone in the big house, surrounded by the past and thinking about the future. I decided to divorce Paul. It was tough, but it had to be done. He and his new family had to move to a rental place. Lucy had her own mess to deal with. Her debts and bad choices were catching up to her. As for me, I was standing in my new house, feeling sad but also kind of excited. Elaine's will wasn't just about the house and money. It was like she was telling me to be strong and make my own way. I decided to start over, use what Elaine left me to build something new for myself. The house, once a reminder of tough times, was now a place for new beginnings. Have you ever heard the saying, your thoughts shape your words, words turn into actions, actions become habits, habits define your character, and your character shapes your destiny? Simply put, what you think can decide where you end up in life. It might sound deep, but it's a straightforward concept. Your thoughts influence how you live. By the time you realize this, it could be too late. This is the story I want to share today. I'm Rebecca, 54 years old, working part-time as a homemaker. Married for 30 years, our 2 kids are grown, and my husband and I enjoy our days together as a couple. Retirement is approaching. I mentioned this over dinner to my husband, who's 3 years older than me and will retire in 3 years. He's been a banker for about 35 years since college. In the past, it was common to use the retirement bonus to pay off the mortgage and plan for post-retirement life. Paying off the mortgage at once with a lump sum was the norm. But times have changed. Oh, really? My husband explained that only a handful of companies offer retirement bonuses in the hundreds of thousands, and getting tens of thousands is considered good. Besides, there's the challenge of needing $200,000 for retirement, and more households prefer keeping as much cash as possible. I was quite intrigued by my husband's banker-like perspective. Regarding our house, what if we pay off a chunk to save on interest? We can then manage the remaining loan with our reduced living expenses. Fortunately, I can work as a contract employee even after retiring. It's comforting to have a financially savvy husband. You're reliable. I complimented him while pouring a glass of wine. One day, some unexpected guests arrived at our house. "Hey Rebecca, it's been a while," greeted my 6-year-old brother and his wife Annabelle. I must have made a face upon seeing them. They weren't pleasant people, but I kept my thoughts to myself. "Why are you here in the middle of the day on a weekday?" I inquired. Annabelle promptly replied, "Well, we just built a new house, and we thought of getting a congratulatory gift." A congratulatory gift? It felt rather impolite to come seeking gifts, and I'm sure many would agree. However, these individuals considered it normal, posing a problem. Reflecting on it, they've been money-focused since their marriage. Back when they got married, I was still in college, and my brother shamelessly said, "You're over 20 now, so you're an adult. Give us a gift, whether you're earning or not. Going to college as a woman is a waste. Use that tuition money for our gift instead." Even my parents were astonished by my brother's greed. I thought no one could be more greedy than him. But it turned out Annabelle was equally miserly. They talk about money all the time, even during Christmas and New Year's. Rebecca, how much do you make? What's your husband's bonus? What assets does your family have? How much is your father getting in pension? Annabelle inquired. There's a recent popular web service that analyzes people's brains just by entering their names, and I can imagine if they used it, the word money would dominate. Dealing with such vulgar and uncivilized people is something I only endure when necessary, and yet, here they are, expecting a congratulatory gift for their new house. Wait, a new house? I learned that my brother retired at 60 this year. Annabelle seems to be working part-time, but, well, this might sound odd. But did you secure a proper loan for your new house? When I inquired, my brother responded, Loan? Not at all. I bought this house with my retirement money and the inheritance from her parents. It turns out my brother used his $80,000 retirement funds, $140,000 in savings, and his sister-in-law's parents' $250,000 inheritance to purchase a house. I've been in a rental for a long time, and I wanted to experience living in a house. A new house is definitely nice. Indeed, it's really nice. Much cleaner than this old house. It's barrier-free, and will be secure in our old age. However, I'm concerned about such a risky move. But you still have 5 years until you start receiving your pension. Don't you think it would be better to have some savings for your old age? When I mentioned that, my sister-in-law shot me a contemptuous look. You're such a worrywart. We've thought about those things. At that moment, my brother and his wife exchanged a creepy smile as they leaned in close to each other. What are they plotting? I discovered their scheme a month later. Rebecca, your dad collapsed. I got that call from my mother during my lunch break at work. My father was perfectly fine when I spoke to him a week ago. Why did this happen? I informed my workplace and immediately rushed to the hospital. Upon arrival, my husband was already there, offering comfort to my haggard and slouched-shouldered mother. How's Dad doing? I inquired, prompting my husband to explain that instead of my mother, my father had collapsed in the bathroom and was rushed unconscious to the hospital. He had been diagnosed with a subarachnoid hemorrhage, undergoing immediate surgery and still undergoing treatment. I see. Did you inform my brothers? Yes, I did, but they mentioned discussing the inheritance before visiting his bedside. So, rather than coming to the hospital, they chose to consult with a lawyer at the law firm. How money-focused can those insensitive couples be? My father is still alive, albeit in critical condition, with a chance of the worst outcome, but it seems inhumane to prioritize sorting out finances while he's still fighting. I'm at a loss for words. Even my mother wears a resigned expression towards their behavior. Honestly, I'm appalled. What kind of heartless individuals are they? The surgery on my father was successful. However, his elderly condition remained precarious, and making predictions seemed impossible. While my mother and I took turns visiting, my brother and his wife were nowhere to be found. Then, a week after the surgery, we received a call from the hospital. Your father's condition has suddenly changed. My husband, mother, and I rushed to the hospital, only to find my brother and his wife surprisingly already there. You arrived early. I commented to my brother, who oddly wore a cheerful expression. Well, why would he look so happy when our parent is in critical condition? The reason became apparent quickly. Hey, what about your father's life insurance? Can you ask your mother about it? My sister-in-law whispered audibly in the hushed hospital room. I shot her a glare, but she appeared genuinely puzzled, saying, "What's wrong?" That foolish expression of hers only fueled my anger. Then the doctor entered the room to check on my father. I believe today is the turning point. The doctor informed us with a serious expression, and my husband, mother, and I broke down in tears. Memories of my father flashed through my mind in an instant. My mother was in the same state, holding my father's hand and calling out to him with a tearful voice. Oh, but we finally get it. Yeah, now our retirement is secure. I overheard my brother and his wife conversing as we mourned. They seemed eagerly anticipating my father's passing. I recalled what they had said earlier. Their focus was on their retirement, connecting it to my father's inheritance, the new house they built by depleting their savings, the matters with the law firm, and this callous statement. My mother seemed to grasp their intentions and shot a sudden look at my brother and his wife. They had a hyena-like appearance, fixated on their prey and eagerly awaiting its demise. People often say that when anger peaks, it transforms into an unusual calmness, and that proved true. My mother appeared to share the same sentiments, and after silently observing my brother and his wife, she suggested, "Let's step outside for a moment." We exited the hospital room and settled into a discussion in the hospital's lounge. "You two really have no idea," my mother stated with a mix of disbelief and perhaps pity as she looked at them. "What do you mean?" My sister-in-law noticed the shift in my mother's demeanor, her expression suddenly stiffening. My brother maintained a relaxed look, but I wondered if it was only a matter of time. My mother continued, "There's no inheritance for you two to claim." "What? What do you mean, Mom?" My brother's expression abruptly tensed. "There's nothing to inherit. The house and land we live on are in my name, and your father has no assets." Come to think of it, I've heard this before. My father was the type who didn't hoard money. He had a habit of spending all he had, and my mother handled all the household finances. The only money my father possessed was for his daily cigarette expenses. Aside from a vague understanding of money, he was a good husband and father. So my mother and father managed quite well together. In reality, my father had no significant assets, and if anything, he only had a few dollars for his cigarette expenses in the coin purse he always carried. "But he has life insurance, right?" "Yes, but I am the beneficiary. It's none of your concern," my mother sharply replied. "Your father is still alive, and this couple is only thinking about money, bringing up life insurance." As I was about to voice my frustration, my mother intervened. "Firstly, your father is not someone who would succumb to something like this. He stayed calm during a motorcycle accident, when caught in an avalanche while skiing, and even when he was ill. He has overcome cancer and liver cirrhosis with sheer willpower. If you're concerned about inheritance, shouldn't you be more focused on your own spouse than your stepfather?" My mother chuckled while addressing my sister-in-law, and my brother was the one expressing his frustration. "Mom, I'm still alive. Don't talk about inheritance. It's inappropriate. It's rude." Their annoyance was likely because they couldn't inherit anything. However, it's the same for you. You're saying the same thing to your father now. Do you realize that? You're being disrespectful and uncivilized. My mother's words left them speechless, forcing them to remain silent. And there was no inheritance to claim. They stood there stunned. What should we do? We built a house and bought a car because we expected an inheritance. How will we sustain ourselves from next month? Last month, we went on a shopping spree using credit, and we still have outstanding loans for the air conditioner and refrigerator we purchased when we moved. My husband and I observed these 60-year-olds panicking due to a lack of funds. I quietly suggested, "Firstly, it's wrong to rely on money that you're not even sure of receiving. You lack proper planning skills." The two of them seemed too drained to argue with me. Then my brother proposed, "Let's sell a house. It's the only solution." While it sounded like a sensible idea, my sister-in-law vehemently opposed it. "No, that house is my sanctuary. I won't sell it. We finally found a peaceful place to live, and I won't give it up because of this." "Oh, if your father doesn't have an inheritance, why not consider sharing your mother's inheritance?" "Yes, let's do that." "It's a good idea," my sister-in-law suggested, approaching my mother. "I'm still alive." My mother's response was so comical that I nearly burst out laughing, but I had to hold it in. My brother looked at me. "Help me out here." I could almost hear his plea in his expression. At that moment, my husband, a banker, chimed in. "Why not consult a financial planner? If you have no income and no savings, you're in a hopeless situation. Selling the house seems appropriate. Fortunately, there's no mortgage, so selling it can bring in some cash for you to live on. Selling the house is the only way to escape this predicament. However, my sister-in-law remained adamant. We won't sell the house. Absolutely not. If that's your stance, then contribute to our living expenses. After all, you're siblings, right? This time, she redirected her attention to us, but my husband skillfully sidestepped the request. It's not feasible. I only invest in ventures with assured returns. My husband's words, shaped by years in the loan department, carried weight. Even if there were potential returns, I wouldn't invest in such a couple. Amidst our discussion, the doctor called. Finally, the moment had arrived. I was mentally prepared for it. When my mother returned from the hospital room, she informed us, "It might not be good news for you. Your father has regained consciousness." She said this while casting a cold stare at my brother and his wife. My husband and I felt a wave of relief at my mother's words, and tears welled in our eyes. My brother and his wife, having realized they would not inherit anything, seemed indifferent to my father's condition. Yet perhaps they were attempting to maintain the facade of concerned children. "Dad, that's great. Yes, you're right." They uttered these insincere words. As my husband and I entered the hospital room after my mother, my brother and his wife trailed behind with seemingly innocent faces. Just before they could enter, my mother halted them. "You two are excused. Your obsession with money sickens me. If you have the time to visit, contemplate your life from tomorrow onwards." She dismissed them like stray dogs and concluded with this remark. "I'll leave you with this message. Thoughts become words. Words become actions. Actions become habits. Habits become character. And character becomes destiny." My brother and his wife were left stunned by my mother's unexpected speech. Huh? In essence, your thoughts ultimately shape your destiny. Unless you alter your thinking, your destiny remains unchanged. Reflect on this carefully. Consider how foolish, unsightly, and pitiable your actions are. With that, my mother firmly shut the door to the hospital room, signaling her determination to break ties with her son. Following that, my brother and his wife were compelled to sell their house. They had to part with their recently constructed home and land for less than a quarter of the $400,000 they initially paid, just 6 months after putting it on the market. This was due to the discovery that the ground in the area was quite unstable, causing land prices to plummet. Moreover, the surplus of houses for sale in the vicinity led to buyers offering very low prices. Despite their reluctance, they had no choice but to sell the house. The unemployed couple now has only a meager amount of cash to sustain them in their old age. It's likely that the funds will deplete before they begin receiving their pension in 5 years. My brother resorts to working as a day laborer for daily wages, while my sister-in-law takes on part-time work. It's a lamentable tale of individuals self-destructing by relying on their parents' inheritance. I hope they grasp the gravity of my mother's words. Surprisingly, there are many stories like this. When people become fixated on money, their judgment often falters. A previous customer of mine once remarked, "When my parents pass away, I'll use the inheritance to pay off my mortgage. So please arrange it for a 20-year term." Such cases are not uncommon. It appears that such situations are prevalent in the world. It's indeed a significant issue. Bankers, dealing with a diverse range of individuals, undoubtedly have a challenging job. There are countless untold stories due to confidentiality. Perhaps I should let my husband take over as the next storyteller. He might have even more fascinating tales to share. Just kidding. How did you find this story? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Until the next video. Your mom and dad are really sick. You have to come back home right away. I begged Tyler to help, but he was mean. He said, "I'm busy with my friends. Deal with it yourself. You're probably making it sound worse than it is, right? I gotta go." I tried to talk to him again, but he hung up on me. 2 weeks later, when Tyler got home, I told him, "They're both gone. Their funerals are done." Tyler looked shocked and confused. "What do you mean both? Are you joking?" he asked me, scared. "No joke. I called you 2 weeks ago about your mom and dad being very sick, I told him. But why didn't you tell me earlier? Tyler was speechless. My name is Jessica Atkins. I'm 56 and I take care of the house full-time. I used to work at an office, but I quit when I got married. I met Tyler in college. I joined the tennis club because a friend asked me to. I didn't know how to play. I just wanted to have fun. But Tyler, who was in charge, was serious about tennis. He'd get mad if you couldn't keep up during practice. Because I was new at tennis, I couldn't even hit the ball with my racket, and Tyler would get mad at me. He'd say, "Jessica, seriously, you're just getting in the way. Go do something else," and make me leave the court. His words made me feel really embarrassed. Most of the time, I was only allowed to pick up the balls, hardly ever getting to play. I got so frustrated that I practiced tennis at home. Maybe all that practice paid off. One day, when Tyler served the ball, I hit it back really well. Tyler looked surprised because he thought I'd miss. But then he said, "Jessica, that was amazing," with a big smile. In that moment, I realized I had feelings for him. After that, Tyler kept being strict, and I kept trying hard to keep up with his tough training. Then one day, after a while, we were out with friends for our monthly get-together. We do this to strengthen our friendships outside of our usual group activities. On our way home from one of these gatherings, it was just me and Tyler. Suddenly, he told me he had feelings for me. "Jessica, I've fallen for you. I want us to be together." I was surprised. Tyler had never shown any signs of liking me before. But I also had feelings for him. So I said, "I like you too. Let's give it a try." That was the start of our relationship. Tyler wanted to keep our relationship a secret from our club friends to not affect the team spirit. But I was so in love with him at that time. I was just happy to be with him. We kept dating even after we finished college, and we got married when I was 26. I quit my job as Tyler asked when we got married. I'll always be there for Tyler, I thought. At that time, I was deeply in love, imagining a bright future with Tyler. It's been 30 years since Tyler and I tied the knot. In the beginning, we went on lots of dates and were really close. But as time passed, things started feeling a bit ordinary. Even I didn't put as much effort into my looks as I did when I was younger. I used to wear trendy clothes and always look stylish when going out with Tyler. I remember spending a lot of time on my makeup, but now I'm more relaxed about how I dress. Comfort is key for me these days, so I prefer loose skirts with elastic waists over ones with zippers. Since I stay home most of the time, I don't bother with makeup from morning to night. I can't even remember the last time I wore any. Some people might think I've let myself go. Compared to my younger days, my body has changed quite a bit. I used to be slim, but not anymore. I've gained weight and now look like the before pictures you see on weight loss shows. Maybe this change in how I look is one reason why our relationship feels routine now. Over time, I've noticed Tyler treating me more like a mom than a wife. Even though I'm not his mother, he sometimes jokes, "Mom, can I get another coffee?" By the way, Tyler's mom still lives nearby, about a 10-minute walk from us, along with his dad. But we live in separate homes. My in-laws are really kind and always worry about me. Because they're so caring, I wanted to support them, so I visited them a lot. But recently, their health has been getting worse. My father-in-law is fighting a serious illness, and the doctors say there's not much more they can do. With tears in his eyes, he told my mother-in-law and me, "I want to spend my last days at home." So he left the hospital and is now getting special care at home. Taking care of my father-in-law all by herself, my mother-in-law looks exhausted, and she seems really sad. As a stay-at-home wife, I help take care of my in-laws almost every day, but I know it must be really hard for my mother-in-law to live with him all the time. It's tough, Jessica. Could you stay with us just for one night? She asks me, looking vulnerable. I'm sorry. Tyler comes home at night, I say, even though it hurts to turn her down. I understand. My mother-in-law says sadly when I say no. Every night, I have to take care of Tyler. Tyler is a very bossy husband and never helps with anything around the house. He just leaves his dirty socks everywhere. I have to make sure dinner is ready and warm when Tyler gets home. There's no way I can serve leftovers. If he finds out, he'll get really angry. Once I was late getting home because I was taking care of my father-in-law. When I finally got back, Tyler was furious. "You should put me first instead of my dad. I'm your family, remember?" He yelled at me, his face all red. I wanted to remind him that my father-in-law is his family too. But I stayed quiet because I knew arguing would only make things worse. Because of moments like this, I'd always have to prioritize Tyler. Every day feels so tight and stressful. As a stay-at-home wife, I feel guilty and can't stand up to Tyler. I couldn't help my sad mother-in-law. I could only look at her with worry. Lately, Tyler's been coming home late a lot, and he never tells me. Sometimes, he even comes home on the last train. "You're late again." Tyler came home after midnight one night. "I'm back," he said happily. His face was red, and he seemed a bit drunk. "Did you go drinking again? You've been coming home late so often," I asked, taking the bag he handed me. "I'd earned the money, so I'll spend it how I want," Tyler replied. "But you're just a stay-at-home wife, so you should just obey me," Tyler replied gruffly. "But don't you think it's happening too often? Who are you going out with all the time? Their families might be worried too," I hesitantly asked Tyler. "Maybe you're making people go drinking with you. You've been with the company for so long and hold a high position. It's hard for most people to say no to that," Tyler replied with a smug smile. "It's fine. I always go drinking with the same coworker. Plus, he lives alone and is single. He's always happy when I buy him a drink," Tyler said smugly. I couldn't say anything back. Being a stay-at-home wife without much say in things, I had an idea and decided to talk to Tyler about it. "Could you tell me beforehand when you're going out for drinks? Your mom seems really stressed, and your dad's not doing well either. I want to be there for them as much as possible." But Tyler laughed off my concerns. "No way. I go out when I feel like it. Besides, Mom will handle Dad. Jessica, you should be all for me." As I was shocked by Tyler's harsh words, he said, "Stop standing there and get the bath ready. You're so slow with it," and he quickly went to the bathroom. "Yes, I'm sorry." All I could do was reply like that. Then one day, Tyler suddenly said to me, "I'm going on a trip for 2 weeks starting next week." While I stood there in shock, Tyler cheerfully looked through a guidebook, thinking about what he'd eat. And he was planning to go to Australia. Regaining my composure, I asked Tyler, "Why the sudden international trip? What about your job? And I don't even have a passport." Tyler seemed a bit annoyed by my questions. "I got a bonus, so I thought I'd just go for it. I've already asked for time off from work, and I'm not taking you, Jessica, so you don't need a passport, right?" Tyler answered casually. "We haven't even had a proper honeymoon since we got married." "Who are you going with?" I asked Tyler. Even for day trips, Tyler would say it's a waste of money and never took me along. Now this sudden international trip, it seemed suspicious. I looked at Tyler intently. "I'm going with a coworker," Tyler replied. "Now hurry up and get dinner ready." I realized it would be hard to question him further. Tyler probably wouldn't answer me if I kept asking, and he might even get angry. Though I felt frustrated, I reluctantly started preparing dinner. And on that day, Tyler set off for his trip early in the morning. But by noon, I found myself desperately calling him. "What do you want?" "I'm about to board a plane for an international trip." "Can't you see I'm busy?" Tyler snapped at me as soon as he answered. "My in-laws are in critical condition. Please, can't you cancel your trip and come home immediately?" I pleaded desperately with Tyler. If he hadn't boarded the plane yet, there was still time, or so I thought. But Tyler's response was harsh. "I'm on vacation with my colleague. Deal with it on your own. You're probably making it sound worse than it is. I'm busy. Gotta go now. Bye." "Wait a second." I tried to reach out to Tyler, but he hung up on me anyway. No matter how many times I called back, he didn't answer. "You'll regret this," I muttered to myself. 2 weeks later, I'm back. Tyler came in cheerfully, carrying a big suitcase. I went up to Tyler, feeling angry and upset, and said, "Both their funerals are over." "What?" Tyler looked confused, like he didn't understand. "What do you mean by both their funerals? Are you playing some kind of sick joke?" Tyler panicked, questioning me. I sighed deeply at Tyler's reaction. "It's not a joke. Don't you remember? I called you 2 weeks ago, telling you your parents were really sick," I reminded Tyler. "But why so suddenly?" Tyler trailed off, unable to find the words, and I found myself sitting on the floor. "When I went to see your parents, they both had collapsed and looked really pale. I called an ambulance in a panic, but the doctor said they were both in critical condition. Your dad needed care for a while, and your mom hadn't been well lately. It was just a series of unfortunate events," I explained to Tyler, feeling detached as I recounted what had happened leading up to my in-laws' critical condition. I'm heartbroken that my in-laws ended up like this. I was at their house almost every day and still couldn't save them in time. To this day, I regret not going there sooner. But right now, I'm just so angry at Tyler. My in-laws are his real parents, yet Tyler chose himself over them until the very end. No matter how much I begged, Tyler always put himself first. Remembering the tired look on my mother-in-law's face just makes me even angrier at Tyler, I said to Tyler, who remained silent with a grim expression. He probably can't accept what happened. I decided to confront Tyler further. "It's your fault, isn't it? Choosing a trip with your colleague over your own parents. Did you have a good time on your vacation?" I asked Tyler, trying to hide my anger with a sly smile. But Tyler just stayed silent. So I decided to poke a little further. "Well, I guess going on a trip with your lover is fun, right? But 2 weeks seems a bit long." When I said that, Tyler, almost resigned, started to speak. "You knew?" "Yeah, I've been seeing Baker from work. She's over 10 years younger than you, and she's been comforting me." It was clear that Tyler was indeed having an affair. His recent late nights were probably because of this Baker. As I remained silent, Tyler, thinking I had accepted his confession, continued to talk. "Baker is nothing like you. She's slim, beautiful, and she has a job. You don't compare to her." Tyler was obviously proud of himself. Not bothered at all. I responded casually. He seemed to forget that he had asked me to become a stay-at-home wife after we got married. Then, as if he had an idea, Tyler made a suggestion. "Exactly. Now that my parents are gone and there's no one to object, we can get a divorce and I can live here with Baker. So, leave right now." I was shocked by Tyler's words. Until now, I have been a stay-at-home wife, always going along with whatever Tyler said. I didn't have a steady income of my own, and part of me lacked the confidence to move out and support myself. But after seeing Tyler prioritize a trip with his mistress over his critically ill parents, I didn't want to stay with him anymore. "Fine, I'll leave right now. Goodbye," and with that, I packed a few essentials and left the house. A week later, I found myself staying at a budget motel. My husband Tyler called my cell phone. "Hello?" As soon as I picked up, Tyler spoke up. "I can't find the checkbook at home." He sounded really panicked. But I left all the statements under Tyler's name at the house. That includes the bank book where Tyler's salary is deposited. The only checkbook I took is in my name. "Did you check properly?" As soon as I said that, Tyler shouted, "It's the checkbook in your name. That account had a pretty good amount of money, right? It's joint property, so half of it's mine, isn't it?" After spending recklessly on trips and such, I couldn't believe Tyler was now talking about joint property. Holding back a heavy sigh, I calmly replied, "The money in that checkbook is from gifts I received from my family and savings from when I was single, so it doesn't count as joint property." "You know that." Tyler, sounding frantic, responded, "That's a problem. I nearly spent all of my last month's salary and bonus on the overseas trip. I thought I could cover the shortfall in our living expenses by withdrawing from your account. Up until now, I'd kept my checkbook in a drawer where Tyler could easily see it. I had no intention of hiding it from Tyler, so he must have seen the balance. I've moved out, Tyler, so I have no idea about your living expenses. Maybe ask for an advance on your paycheck. I firmly declined Tyler's request. Then, just to give Tyler a heads up, I added, by the way, there's hardly any inheritance from your parents. They were living on their pensions, and with the cost of your father's care, they were barely getting by. And you better clear out their rented apartment soon, or you'll be paying rent every month. My in-laws have been living in a rented apartment, barely making ends meet with the rent and the cost of caring for my father-in-law. My mother-in-law somehow managed to save and get by each month. I reckon my mother-in-law had her share of worries and stress. You're kidding, Tyler sounded shocked over the phone. So I decided to give Tyler the final blow. I have no responsibilities to help you out. You are on your own, I declared cheerfully. Why? Tyler's voice was full of disbelief. Despite kicking me out without any income, he seemed to have forgotten that. I hope they both lose their social credibility. I've got nothing left to lose. Whatever happens to them, it's none of my business. It's all my fault. Just help me out this time, please. Tyler pleaded with a voice full of desperation. No way. You're going to regret this big time. I told him that and ended the call with Tyler. Tyler and I eventually went through with the divorce. Initially, Tyler resisted, mainly due to financial concerns, but he eventually caved in and signed the divorce papers after persuasion from my lawyer. Tyler always acted tough around me and my in-laws, but seemed submissive around others. He was all talk and no action, unable to stand up to a professional like my lawyer. Our properties were divided equally, thanks to my lawyer's efforts. Tyler had almost depleted his savings on a trip with Baker, so he was strapped for cash. My lawyer predicted Tyler would be uncooperative, but in the end, I was satisfied with the outcome. As for what happened afterward, it appears Tyler is struggling to make ends meet, living from one paycheck to the next. He has additional expenses like clearing out my in-laws' rental apartment and paying rent. Moreover, he was dumped by Baker after their affair was exposed. Initially, Baker was ambitious and used Tyler for her own gain, but she distanced herself once Tyler was demoted and she got transferred elsewhere. Tyler reached out to me through my lawyer, expressing regret and asking for another chance. Since I've blocked his calls, he's resorting to communicating through the lawyer. This desperate plea indicates he's truly cornered. He's even asked for financial help, requesting money from my savings from when I was single, which doesn't benefit me at all. Even the lawyer was surprised by this request. I hope Tyler continues to struggle. He deserves it for his actions. By the way, I reached out to Baker through my lawyer, and her response was surprisingly respectful. She conveyed, while I was with Mr. Tyler, my expenses were minimal, so I enjoyed spending his money. But it didn't last long. She expressed deep regret for everything. It became evident that she was never truly interested in Tyler. Rather, she was attracted to his status. It's sad to see Tyler fall so hard for someone who didn't genuinely care about him. Reflecting on Tyler's downfall brought a smirk to my face. Since then, I've decided to rejoin the workforce. Can you believe it? I took up a part-time job at a convenience store. It's my first time in customer service, and surprisingly, I'm enjoying it. I was initially concerned about being on my feet all day, but once I started, time just flew by, and I found it quite enjoyable. Besides manning the register, there's tasks like stocking shelves, preparing snacks, and various other responsibilities at a convenience store. I even get to utilize my housekeeping skills with the cleaning duties. The manager mentioned that if I put in the effort, I could secure a permanent position. Apparently, there have been others in similar situations who successfully transitioned to full-time roles. Being in my 50s feels like I'm at the midpoint of life. Despite going through a divorce, I initially thought my future looked bleak. But even at this age, I'm discovering new experiences and having a great time. I'm determined to keep looking forward and moving ahead. That's my mindset right now. A huge renovation for elder care? $30,000? What's going on? Wait, Isn't that my wife's parents' house? Then, I get this strange call from someone claiming to be my estranged sister-in-law's husband. Something doesn't add up here. It seems like my sister-in-law might be plotting something. Hi, I'm Martha, a 56-year-old stay-at-home wife. My kids are grown and out of the house now, so it's just me, my husband, and my in-laws living together. Thankfully, I have a good relationship with them, which is nice since I lost my own parents when I was young. With the kids gone, my husband and I are finally enjoying some freedom from parenting duties. When my husband and I tied the knot, we knew we'd eventually share a home with his parents. However, my mother-in-law, who had a rough time with her own mother-in-law, had her house turned into a two-family home for us. Even though we live under the same roof, we each have our own space, which has probably helped our relationship flourish. While my husband is at work during the day, I'd often hang out with my in-laws. One day, while my father-in-law was busy with farm chores, I was fixing lunch in the kitchen, planning for us to enjoy it outside. Suddenly, a call came from one of my father-in-law's farming buddies, informing us that he had fallen and broken a bone. He had already been rushed to the family doctor in a pickup truck. My mother-in-law and I abandoned the food and hurried to the hospital. When we got there, emergency surgery was in progress. Despite seeming healthy, my father-in-law was in his 80s, so bouncing back from a fracture wouldn't be easy. The doctors warned us to brace for the worst, possibly even needing a wheelchair. So that's what they meant. As long as he pulls through, that's all that matters. I'll be there to support him, I vowed. We sat anxiously, hearts heavy with prayers, as the surgery dragged on. By the time my husband finished work and joined us, the surgery was over, and we breathed a collective sigh of relief seeing my father-in-law peacefully sleeping in his hospital room, free of any major complications. We decided to rally around him together from then on. But our hopes were dashed when, just a month later, my father-in-law passed away suddenly. His age had left him vulnerable, and he succumbed to an infection that took hold after the surgery. With many of his friends and family also elderly, we hesitated to burden them with news of the wake and funeral. After much discussion, we settled on a private family funeral. Yet even in death, there were unresolved tensions. What about my sister-in-law? I raised the question to my mother-in-law and husband, both wearing expressions of disapproval, likely remembering her troubled marriage, which they had vehemently opposed. While my husband didn't share their strong opposition, he couldn't fully embrace the idea either. This created a strain, causing their relationship with their daughter to become distant. Still, she was their flesh and blood. Shouldn't she have the chance to bid her final farewell? Eventually, they relented, agreeing that if we could reach her, she could attend. But our attempts to contact her proved futile, and the funeral proceeded without her presence. It's just the way things are with her. It's fate. Don't dwell on it, Martha. My mother-in-law comforted me, gently patting my shoulder as we made our way home from the crematorium with my father-in-law's ashes. His sudden passing left us all reeling, without any mental preparation for the funeral and cremation process. As we clasped his ashes and lit incense, the days that followed were filled with a sense of emptiness. It's easier when my husband is here. We can lean on each other. But when he's at work, the silence becomes unbearable. So I find solace in my mother-in-law's company. I know she's enduring even greater pain and sorrow than I am. After all, she lost the husband she'd been with for so many years in the blink of an eye. Even if it's just a facade, I make an effort to maintain a cheerful demeanor around her, I admitted. But my mother-in-law surprised me with her pragmatism. I had planned to keep things this way until the 49th day. However, yes, we can go through his belongings later. But I'm already over 80. You look remarkably young for your age, mother-in-law. Rarely ill, she'd often mention her only hospitalization being childbirth, indicating her robust health. Essentially, she assured us not to worry about her. You're very kind, Martha. But while I'm still mobile, I'd like to organize our things, including his, she insisted. I understand the sentiment of wanting to preserve important memories, like your father-in-law's belongings. Just let me know if you need assistance, I offered. She promptly asked for help retrieving items out of her reach. As we sifted through old photos of my father-in-law, she fondly recalled their youth, sharing tales of their adventures. I listened attentively, nodding along. When the phone rang, my mother-in-law, who didn't own a smartphone, relied on the landline for communication. I wonder who that could be. Only a few close friends knew our situation, and I thought they might avoid calling once they knew. But it might be urgent. I'll answer it. Considering her difficulty in moving, I decided to answer the phone myself rather than inconvenience her. I quickly reached for the receiver near the entrance, greeted by a polite voice I didn't recognize, introducing himself as my sister-in-law's husband. However, I had never crossed paths with him before, leaving me uncertain if he truly was who he claimed to be. As I listened, pondering if this was a new scam targeting the elderly, he broached the topic. I want to discuss the home renovation for caregiving. My father-in-law had already passed away, so why mention caregiving renovations now? Could he have mistaken my mother-in-law's situation? But she wasn't in need of such extensive care. Excuse me? Are you certain you've dialed the right number? This is my wife's family home, isn't it? The man, supposedly my sister-in-law's husband, referenced her maiden name, which indeed matched my husband's family. There was no mistaking this as their residence. Furthermore, his mention of my sister-in-law's name confirmed his authenticity. Yes, the person you mentioned is indeed my husband's sister. Thank you for your understanding. Given the difficulties our family has faced due to our troubled marriage, I feared I had made a negative impression once again. Although I wasn't privy to why my in-laws vehemently opposed my sister-in-law's marriage, this man didn't give off any negative vibes. On the contrary, he appeared genuinely humble and sincere. According to him, he had heard about the estimated $30,000 needed for caregiving renovations and was determined to make amends for the trouble he had caused. He assured us he intended to fulfill the payment, but needed an extension due to difficulty in gathering the funds by the deadline. It's awkward to have him explain everything before divulging this, but his earnestness made me falter. Thank you for your courtesy. Regarding the extension, please give me a moment. When did you learn about the caregiving renovation? My father-in-law was in good health and actively engaged in agriculture until recently. So there was no need for caregiving renovations at all. Past tense. Yes, my father-in-law passed away. We just concluded his funeral and cremation. I understand. I could almost sense his panic on the other end of the line. He must have been bewildered by the disparity between what his wife had relayed and the truth I presented. It simply didn't add up for him. Gradually, he confessed to having caused considerable distress to my in-laws. When he married into the family, he believed his wife's assertion that her father required care, and he aimed to offer financial aid as a gesture of apology for the inconvenience he had caused. He recounted this to me, seemingly sincere in his intentions. I probed how the notion of my father-in-law needing care had arisen. It emerged a few years back. Initially, he appeared to send a fixed sum each month to contribute to caregiving expenses. However, it became apparent that neither my father-in-law nor mother-in-law were aware of such arrangements. Had they known, my mother-in-law would have surely invited him to the funeral. He claimed her mother had expressed gratitude and that it had been helpful, leading me to believe I was gradually being forgiven. If you were truly forgiven, wouldn't she communicate with you? That's a valid point. Moreover, the amount of money sent annually seemed to be increasing. He had been sending more each month, assuming we had requested additional support, a request we had no memory of making. So none of this money reached you? As I confirmed, I sensed his growing frustration. It was challenging for me to articulate while also absorbing the information. I speculated that perhaps my sister-in-law. Well, I couldn't outright say you're being deceived. But he interjected, you don't need to tiptoe around it. I'm being deceived, aren't I? Unable to confirm or deny, I remained silent. He likely interpreted my silence as confirmation. Seeking guidance on how to proceed if indeed being deceived, he turned to me. While it wasn't my place to advise, I couldn't bear to abandon my sister-in-law, my husband's sibling. Despite our estrangement, I assured him we would discuss the matter and get back to him later. And with that, our conversation concluded for the day. Upon returning to my mother-in-law, she remarked, "That was quite the lengthy call. Was it one of those persistent salespeople? You know, you should just hang up on them." She assumed it was a pushy sales call. "No, it was someone claiming to be my sister-in-law's husband," I replied, sharing the details of the conversation with her. Anger simmered beneath her calm facade as she listened, erupting further upon hearing the entirety of it. What kind of person is she, using her father as an excuse to extort money from her husband? My mother-in-law's hands trembled with fury. It wasn't the first time my sister-in-law had displayed financial irresponsibility, often splurging on luxury items she couldn't afford with her allowance or part-time job earnings. Her behavior seemed suspicious. When she decided to marry, her partner was a man of considerable wealth, which led her parents to vehemently oppose the union. Their opposition wasn't for the sake of my sister-in-law, but rather for her partner's well-being. We then agreed to wait at the culprit's residence with her husband for her eventual return. It had been so long since I last laid eyes on my sister-in-law. When she first introduced her then boyfriend, now husband, to her parents and brother with marriage intentions, there was quite a stir. However, as I wasn't yet formally part of the family, I wasn't present for the commotion. Hence, this would mark my initial encounter with my sister-in-law's spouse. As I had sensed during our phone conversation, he appeared genuinely sincere with a pleasant demeanor. Despite rumors of his substantial income, he didn't seem to lead an extravagant lifestyle. Instead, he appeared to opt for a more modest existence. However, if one of the reasons behind this modesty stemmed from my sister-in-law's deceit, it undoubtedly evoked a complex mix of emotions. Meeting my sister-in-law again after many years, her unexpected encounter with her mother at home left her visibly stunned, her eyes widening in disbelief as she stood frozen in place. The image I had of my sister-in-law was one of someone with a penchant for flashy things. However, the woman before me now appeared excessively ostentatious, lacking any sense of refinement, which was somewhat disheartening to witness. The three of us had agreed beforehand to play along with my sister-in-law's charade. Initially, we opted not to address her deceit directly. "It's been quite some time. I'm glad to see you're doing well," I greeted her with warmth. Caught off guard by the unexpected kindness, my sister-in-law stuttered in response to her mother, perhaps fearing her lies had been exposed, and she would face reprimand. "I've been wanting to see you again after all these years. How have you been?" We chose not to divulge the truth about her father's passing and upheld the pretense that he was still alive. I offered my apologies for not keeping in touch and exchanged pleasantries accordingly. Humbly, my sister-in-law expressed relief that her mother seemed healthy and admitted to worrying about her. However, conspicuously absent from her remarks was any mention of her father. We were keen to avoid any discussion that might inadvertently reveal the truth about her father's condition or the issue of caregiving expenses. It appeared that my husband and she had crossed paths before, yet her deception remained undetected. Perhaps she believed she could continue her charade without consequence. "Your mom seems pleased. It looks like you two are doing well together," remarked my mother-in-law. She was hopeful that her daughter would mend her ways and gradually start supporting her husband. The strategy was to shower her with praise in the hopes of prompting a change of heart. Somehow, my sister-in-law went a step too far, assuring my mother-in-law that she would provide caregiving support if needed, and even insisted not to worry about finances. It's astonishing she could make such promises in front of her husband, who had been supporting her with good intentions. My heart went out to him as he listened to it all, I lamented. Expressing our gratitude, we took our leave that day. Judging from her actions, it seemed probable that my sister-in-law had been diverting the money she requested for her own use. Uncertain of where the hefty sum of $30,000 had disappeared to, we opted to hire a private investigator to delve into her financial affairs. The monthly caregiving funds totaling several $1,000s, were evidently being redirected for her personal benefit. However, what unfolded was a shocking revelation. She was deeply entangled with a favored club host, lavishing him with financial support in a bid to elevate his status. Her extravagant spending included purchasing costly bottles and accumulating debts she couldn't settle each month. As the host faced mounting pressure to settle his unpaid bills, amounting to $30,000, my sister-in-law's husband was incensed, realizing he could no longer turn a blind eye. He meticulously orchestrated his plans while she was away on a trip with her preferred host, oblivious to the unfolding events. Upon returning home a few days later, she was met with a stark reality. Her house was devoid of furniture or personal belongings, leaving her in a state of panic, frantically attempting to reach her husband to no avail. She eventually contacted me in distress. Initially hysterical, she immediately quieted down when I nonchalantly inquired about her trip with the club host. Unable to question how I was aware of her actions without admitting guilt, she found herself at a loss for words. Now it was my turn to confront her, leaving no room for rebuttal. Your deception hasn't gone unnoticed. You've betrayed not only your mother and husband, but also shattered any trust others may have had in you. Furthermore, the father-in-law you exploited as an excuse has passed away. It wasn't entirely her fault for being unaware of her father's passing, but using his supposed care as a pretext to solicit money was unquestionably wrong. I made it clear that her ex-husband was also privy to the truth, and upon realizing she had been abandoned, she erupted into a fit of screams over the phone, resembling a person unhinged. Refusing to engage with her ex-husband and unwilling to burden my elderly mother-in-law further, I volunteered to act as an intermediary with my sister-in-law. Despite her continued protests over the phone, she evoked pity in a way, oblivious to her father's demise and exploiting him as a means to an end. Though she might harbor regrets, it was too late for remorse. I delivered one final message to her. Your ex-husband intends to demand full repayment for the money you squandered on the host. You'll need to find a way to settle the $30,000 debt on your own. Subsequently, she received legal documents from a lawyer. Despite her request to speak with her husband, he remained resolute, unable to stomach any interaction with his ex-wife, even for legal proceedings. With no room for negotiation, my sister-in-law was left to eke out a modest living while grappling with the weight of her debts. Naturally timid, she lived in perpetual fear of the lawyer's notices and the unwelcome visits from debt collectors. As for us, we resumed our ordinary lives. While it took some time to sift through my father-in-law's belongings, we resolved to move forward as a family, including his share. Recently, my mother-in-law has begun showing signs of decline, hinting that the day she'll require care may be nearing. Since we couldn't do much for my father-in-law, my husband, and I pledged to do our utmost for my mother-in-law.
Constructing your own home stands as a monumental achievement in life's journey. But for me, Adeline, aged 30, this milestone was a harbinger of sorrow, marking the crumbling of my marriage. My family unit comprised my 35-year-old spouse, Yuri, and our cherished 3-year-old Sarah. The vision was clear: to erect the dwelling of our dreams. Eagerly, I shared our aspiration with my loved ones, yearning for their support, anticipating smooth progress. Yet reality proved harsh. While others may sail through such endeavors seamlessly, my path diverged. Recent times had been fraught with obstacles in materializing our dream abode, compounded by interference from Yuri's parents. The unraveling commenced on a fateful day when I entrusted Sarah to their care. Yuri and I, slaves to our professions, scarcely savored moments together in the week. Our weekends were devoured by property tours and consultations with architects. Bringing Sarah along proved futile. Her restlessness eclipsed the joy of exploration. Thus, we relied on my parents, conveniently close by, to tend to her. Then came the morning when their news shattered my routine. My father's ailment mandated a hospital visit, rendering them unable to care for Sarah. There seemed no alternative. Our plans for the day hung precariously on the edge of cancellation. Yet, in a surprising turn, my husband proposed, Why not ask my parents to look after her? His suggestion stirred an unexpected turmoil within me, the prospect of discord looming. Truth be told, my relationship with my in-laws was strained. They possessed a notion that familial ties equated to unchecked liberties. Since when was such behavior permissible? Moreover, burdening them with the sudden responsibility of caring for a toddler felt intrusive. However, postponing our plans risked stalling progress on our dream home. After much internal debate, I relented, leaving my daughter in their care. Once my errands were done, I sought to ease any potential tensions, purchasing lavish treats and tokens of appreciation before returning to their doorstep. Perhaps swayed by my gestures, my in-laws welcomed us warmly, expressing gratitude for the gifts as we bid our farewells. Yet on the journey home, I overheard my daughter's innocent chatter. "I'm going to get a new house," she declared, her voice brimming with excitement, before inquiring, "Where will Grandma and Grandpa's rooms be in the new house?" "Oh, Sarah, what are you saying? Did Grandma and Grandpa ask you about their rooms? What did you tell them?" I probed gently, noticing her reluctance to speak further, her gaze fixated on the stuffed penguin cradled in her arms. "Oh no," she murmured, a hint of uncertainty clouding her features. Sighing softly, I attempted to clarify the misunderstanding. "Sweetheart, Grandma and Grandpa aren't moving in with us. Perhaps they were just curious if we have a guest room for them when they visit," I reassured her, hoping to dispel any confusion. From that day onward, my in-laws' visits became more frequent, encroaching even on weeknights and holidays. Currently residing in a modest apartment to save for our future home, their presence always seemed to revolve around our plans and aspirations. Whenever they arrived, my husband eagerly presented them with the blueprints and documents detailing our dream house, his enthusiasm unwavering despite my reservations. "Why do you always have to show them?" His question, tinged with disappointment, left me feeling guilty. But it was my mother-in-law who truly put me on edge. Her inquiries felt akin to an interrogation, each query delivered with the weight of judgment. "This design for the kitchen seems impractical. You should reconsider. And we need more tatami rooms. They're essential for comfort as we age. Also, one child's room won't suffice if you plan to expand your family. Have you thought about the declining birth rate?" Her words pierced through me like accusations in a courtroom. "Wow, definitely not the declining birth rate part," I interjected, unable to suppress my frustration. She couldn't care less about that. She was waiting for my response, Adeline. "Well, given our prior discussions and the arrangements made with our contractor, the layout is already finalized based on our family's needs," I retorted, my tone laced with annoyance. "But what about the furniture? Appliances?" she pressed further, her role as a self-proclaimed interior designer evident in her relentless scrutiny. Drawing on my experiences and observations, I defended our choices. "I've seen plenty of homes and rooms through my extensive network and discerning eye. This house, this room, doesn't meet your standards, but it's what works for us. Things aren't perfect, but we're doing our best," I countered, frustration simmering beneath the surface. Attempting to diffuse the tension with a hint of sarcasm, I suggested, "Maybe we should split the costs and make it a two-family house, since you seem to have so much input." Her reaction was explosive. "Give money to our son and daughter-in-law. You're a gold digger. A two-family house? Ridiculous." With emotions running high, my in-laws left abruptly, their departure marked by bitter words exchanged in the heat of the moment. "Go home. You're not my parents, you're my in-laws. I don't owe you anything. Stop acting like my bosses," I finally snapped, the weight of their intrusion too much to bear. Later that evening, after tucking our daughter into bed, my husband approached me with a weary tone. "My parents are just trying to help. Try not to shut them out," he urged, a hint of exasperation in his voice. "I'm not trying to shut them out, but they meddle in every aspect of our home. They always push us into corners. They treat us like puppets and mock our decisions," I rebutted, frustration seeping into my words. "It's natural. They're parents. Just think about how you'd feel if it were our daughter," he reasoned, his tone softening. "You know I'm not always the most compassionate person, but they need to understand boundaries," I retorted, feeling the weight of his dismissal. With his back turned to me, he fell silent, unwilling to engage further. "While they may be your parents, they're not part of our household. They don't contribute financially, so they don't get to dictate," I asserted, my anger mounting at his unreasonable stance, making sleep elusive that night. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, our home was complete. Excitement filled the air as we settled into our new abode. Yet my husband's revelation shattered the tranquility. My parents are moving in today. They'll take the larger room on the second floor, and we'll take the smaller one, he declared casually. What? Hold on. We agreed one of those rooms would be Sarah's. I never agreed to living together. None of this was discussed, I protested, incredulity coloring my voice. They've already seen the room. Don't worry, they'll like it, he assured me, his nonchalant tone aggravating my frustration. Your parents have seen it too. When? I queried, my bewilderment palpable. The day before we went to see the house, he admitted casually. Wait a minute, so let me get this straight. Your parents visited the house before we did? I pressed, struggling to comprehend. Yeah, they wanted to take a look, so I gave them my key. What harm could it do? It's not like they damaged anything, he replied, his tone dismissive as he returned to wiring the TV. What harm? It's a big deal, I snapped, avoiding eye contact as I abandoned the kitchen and retreated upstairs. Locking the door behind me, I sought solace in solitude, my mind a tumult of frustration and confusion. Grateful for the distraction of tidying up after the move, I stewed in resentment toward my husband and in-laws, especially given their sudden decision to move in with us. I can't stand being around them for another minute, but we've just made a huge investment in this house. I need to keep calm, think about what I say, and consider my daughters and my future. I resolved, sequestering myself in contemplation as I awaited their arrival. True to my husband's word, they appeared early in the afternoon, unloading their belongings from a truck. They could at least greet us. They have no sense of decency. And look at this mess. You haven't even cleaned up yet. You're utterly useless, my mother-in-law criticized, her words stinging with disdain. After much grumbling, my in-laws barged into our freshly constructed home, acting as if they were entitled to do so. Eavesdropping on the commotion from upstairs, I emerged from my room and made my way to the front door. I wasn't aware that we'd be sharing our home with you as well, I stated resignedly, my tone unexpectedly icy. My father-in-law, clearly irked by my tone, wasted no time in shifting the blame onto me. I mentioned to Yuri that it shouldn't be an issue, didn't I? But it is an issue. I only found out this morning from Yuri that he invited you both to live with us, and I have no desire to reside with such disrespectful individuals, I asserted firmly. Whatever Yuri decides is fine. Are you implying you can defy your husband? He retorted. Yes, I am. Are you suggesting I'm an impertinent wife? If you don't like it, why don't you just leave? I knew this was futile. The clash in perspectives has been apparent for some time now, rendering communication impossible with these individuals. I mused silently, contemplating my next move. Before I could form a response, my husband burst in, his expression fraught with panic. Adeline, what are you doing? Don't argue with my parents. Argue? There's no parity here. I've been subjected to unilateral mistreatment simply because I'm your wife, and now you're blaming me again. Like father, like son, it seems, Yuri, I retorted sharply. I can't live with your parents, I stated firmly. Don't embarrass me. You're my wife. You're supposed to obey me, he insisted. I'm a person before I am your wife. You can expect blind obedience, I countered, my resolve unwavering. Listening in, my father-in-law interjected angrily. I won't accept that kind of wife for you. I won't allow her in my house, he declared vehemently. To my astonishment, my husband echoed his sentiments. Being my wife takes precedence. If you can't tend to my parents, perhaps we should consider divorce. I agree with my father, my husband affirmed. Understood. Then let's proceed with a divorce, I declared resolutely, the weight of my decision hanging heavy in the air. Even as I spoke, I silently prayed that my smartphone, nestled in my pocket, was recording every word exchanged. As the reality of our impending separation sank in, my in-laws reacted with incredulity. If we're to become strangers, then return the $259,778.88 loan I provided for the house construction immediately, they demanded, their shock palpable. My husband paled at their words, his expression one of sheer horror. Calmly, I addressed the confusion. There appears to be a misunderstanding. Yuri didn't contribute a cent to the house. It was solely funded by my savings because he had none. Despite our agreement to split expenses evenly and save the surplus, he squandered money without saving a dime, I explained, laying bare the truth for my bewildered in-laws to comprehend. "Oh, come on, Adeline. You can't do this," my husband exclaimed, disbelief etched on his face. It's the truth. When it came to buying the house, he wouldn't budge. He insisted it be in my name. That's why I loaned you the money, remember? I have a signed AU, so you can't deny it, I asserted firmly. Oh no. Their expressions frozen in shock, I swiftly packed my suitcase and overnight bag, filling them with essentials, clothes, and my daughter's treasured toys, ensuring her favorite penguin was securely tucked under my arm. Loading everything into my Mini Cooper, I wasted no time starting the engine. With a heavy heart, I bid farewell to the house I had only just begun to call home. Hastily collecting my daughter from daycare, I sped toward my parents' house. Their surprise at my sudden appearance, clad in sweatpants and laden with luggage, was evident. If this is inconvenient or too sudden, I can stay at a hotel, I offered tentatively, but they quickly intervened, urging me to stay. I sensed their determination to shield me from harm. Sharing my plight with them, I explained my decision to leave my husband, who had nothing but scorn for me, and expressed my desire to provide a stable environment for my daughter. They pledged their full support and generously offered me a place to stay, despite my employment. It was a lifeline I gratefully accepted, knowing I had allies in my corner. That evening, I meticulously documented every detail of my tumultuous interactions with my husband and in-laws. Saving audio recordings from my phone onto my computer and external drives, I diligently compiled evidence. Utilizing my paid time and weekends, I visited numerous lawyers, determined to find one I could trust. Eventually, I found a legal representative whom I felt confident in and submitted a formal request. My days were consumed by these tasks, and before I knew it, a week had flown by. Since the day I fled our once beautiful home, I'd been avoiding my husband, but one evening, as I left the office, he was waiting for me, though I wished to label him as my ex-husband. Until the divorce proceedings concluded, he remained my spouse in legal terms. With little to say to him, I suggested we find a public space for a conversation to avoid any potential outbursts. Ever cautious, I discreetly activated the recording function on my phone before we entered a nearby coffee shop. "Is there something you want to discuss?" I asked him calmly, steeling myself for whatever response he might offer. "Well, it's about the house. I want you to have it, Adeline. I'll remove my name from the lease. Can't we just forget about the money?" he proposed, his tone tentative. "I'm sorry, I can't do it. I can't bear to live in that house anymore. Your parents, they were the first to set foot in it, weren't they?" I stated firmly. "Why does that matter?" he countered. "It matters to me, so I can't," I reiterated. Taking a sip of coffee, I scrutinized my soon-to-be ex-husband. His disheveled appearance spoke volumes, unkempt hair, stubble on his chin, and a worn-out complexion. Despite his suit, his shirt looked neglected, lacking the care of ironing or dry cleaning. I couldn't help but wonder how he was coping, but fatigue etched across his face told its own story. "Adeline, please, I can't repay such a substantial sum so easily," he pleaded. "You were aware of the amount. I even suggested we share ownership of the house, despite it being mine. But you refused to compromise," I reminded him. "I thought it would be more like being landlords. And I didn't realize you were serious about the divorce. I thought it was just a threat," he confessed, desperation evident in his voice. "I am serious. I won't tolerate such disrespectful parents sticking around," I declared resolutely. "Oh no," he murmured, realization dawning upon him. "I need to go. Sarah is waiting for me," I asserted, my unease palpable. "I'll leave when you're finished. I'm going to take care of Sarah," my ex-husband countered, his words sending a shiver down my spine. Hastily, I retreated to my parents' house, urging them to be vigilant against any attempts to forcibly take Sarah. A few days later, a call from the daycare center sent me into a panic. A couple resembling my in-laws had appeared, attempting to collect Sarah. Racing to the daycare, I arrived just in time, thankfully having alerted the staff beforehand. They had kept my in-laws confined to a separate room, denying them access to Sarah. Yet upon my arrival, I was met with a barrage of accusations. "Give me back my grandchild, you thieving cat," my mother-in-law bellowed. "I'm not a thief," I retorted indignantly. "If you're not a thief, you're a fraud. If you're not a thief, you're a swindler. Otherwise, how could you have amassed so much money at your age?" she accused, her words laced with venom. "No, all the money I lent to Yuri was my own. It's rightfully mine," a combination of my personal earnings, contributions from my parents, and a gift from my late grandmother, I clarified. A gift? My mother-in-law echoed incredulously. Why didn't you think to gift our son before your grandmother passed away? You could still do it now, couldn't you? She pressed. Caught off guard, my father-in-law let out a grunt before falling silent. My in-laws were ostentatious, valuing luxury above all else. Coming from a modest background, they lacked substantial savings or the inclination to gift large sums during their lifetime. I'm sorry, but Yuri and I are divorcing. I'll be taking custody of Sarah and raising her alone. Please refrain from visiting the daycare. It's disruptive, I informed them firmly. With that, I hurriedly ushered Sarah into the car and returned to my parents' home. Despite my warnings, Yuri and his parents persisted in their visits. Each encounter was fraught with tension, with verbal abuse and attempts to physically restrain me becoming commonplace. I recorded every instance on my phone. About a month after my abrupt departure from our new home, I instructed my lawyer to request repayment of the debt and initiate divorce proceedings. While my ex-husband initially hesitated, particularly regarding custody arrangements for Sarah, a stern reminder of potential alimony charges for contesting the matter seemed to quell his resistance. Armed with ample evidence and facing a lack of savings on their part, I pursued the repayment of owed funds and secured custody of Sarah through the divorce proceedings. It was a lengthy process, exacerbated by complications in selling the house. Initially intended for Yuri and my in-laws, financial constraints forced them to list the property for sale at a loss. After numerous price reductions, a buyer was eventually found, but the sale proceeds were insufficient to cover the initial purchase price and associated costs. Resorting to bank loans to bridge the gap, my ex-husband found himself burdened with debt and without a home, forced to return to his parents' cramped residence. Adding to their woes, Yuri's sister, also divorced, moved back in with her 2 teenage sons, exacerbating tensions in the already crowded household. The resulting chaos and constant bickering became a notorious feature of the neighborhood. With their financial struggles hindering their ability to provide adequate child support, the courts intervened to limit their visitation rights. Thus, the tumultuous family no longer posed a threat to her peace of mind. 4 years have elapsed since those tumultuous times, and Sarah, now in the 2nd grade, brings joy to our lives every day. We reside in a rented space close to my parents' home, where their support provides solace, especially on days when work keeps me late. The thought of continuing to raise Sarah with their assistance, sans remarriage, had crossed my mind. Yet unexpectedly, romance found me. I've been seeing a 36-year-old divorced man with a 1st-grade daughter, whom I often encounter during daycare drop-offs and pickups. Our casual conversations gradually blossomed into something deeper, culminating in his heartfelt confession of affection. Recently, we've been enjoying outings together, our daughters forming a natural bond during playdates. During one such outing, Sarah innocently voiced her dream of a future home where each of us would have our own space, along with a beloved family pet. Her words stirred something within me, igniting a flurry of emotions. With a proposal lingering in the air, I stand at a crossroads. Carefully considering my daughter's welfare and my own desires, I realize my heart has already made its decision. I gather Sarah in my arms, her innocence a beacon of hope, and declare, yes, I do want to build another home. But this time, let's do it together as a family, ensuring everyone's happiness.